Well, I have 2 o'clock, so it looks like it's time to get started. I want to welcome everybody to today's Shoptalk. Please make sure that you keep your line on mute, and we will call on you if you have questions during the question and answer period. So as we get started, I want to turn it over to our moderator, Gary Means, to kick off this conversation.
Thanks, Justin, and thanks everybody for joining us. This is a really important conversation. I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. And I'm super excited about this amazing panel of folks that come to us with different personal experiences or trainings or a combination of both to kind of lend a hand to this conversation. And it really, I'll get into this a little bit more as we go along, but this is kind of the second similar format that we've done regarding diversity, equity, inclusion. We did a fireside chat back in August, and I think we can pop a link up. If you didn't get a chance to see or view that even since then, you can go back and listen to it. And part of what that'll also do is kind of give you a little context for IPMI sort of taking on this endeavor and really something that was kind of going on with me during 2020 and watching all that was going on with the Black Lives Matter movements and things like that, that I spent some time reaching out to a lot of my friends in the minority world and just, was kind of learning a lot and just kept wanting to keep that conversation going. So we did that fireside chat just to talk about, how folks are affected and have been affected even during their life and their career. And as we continue to look at this, at least from the parking industry, and I'll step back one more time. One of the things that I think about is, when we see a problem, sometimes a lot of us will just want to change the world. And that's a great motivation, but sometimes it's a little impossible to change the world, but we can't affect the circles that we run in. And so, hey, we're all a part of the parking industry. So we start to take a look at that as well. And that's what brings us to today's conversation with our suppliers and vendors and consultants of the industry, is that if you went to an IPMI conference and you looked around the room and what diversity you might find, I think you'll all agree with this, is that there's a lot more diversity within the municipal and university sector just because of hiring practices and the way things have traditionally been done in those governmental settings. And when you start to take a look at a lot of our operators and consultants, you see a lot less. And of course, we're not here to bash on anybody, but I think that as I've reached out and talked to several people, it seems to be a true statement. And so that's why we just thought we'd have this conversation with this group today. So also want to encourage you to use the chat box as we're talking, as we go along with our panel and ask questions. Fire off some questions that you might have, or if you disagree with something we said, tell us. Certainly we want to be nice, but this is can be and sometimes uncomfortable. It's okay to ask an uncomfortable question. Let's just be respectful. So please use the chat box. Also super excited. I got so excited, I threw it up as my background, that if you haven't noticed or saw it today, IPMI announced that the conference, our annual conference and expo, will be held in sunny, beautiful Tampa, Florida from November 29th to December the 2nd. So let's get back together again, man. Aren't you ready for that? So excited. All right. I see lots of applause and fists going up in the air. This is good. So we're excited. Be watching your email or IPMI's website to find out more as registration and sales opportunities will start to come forward. So again, November 29th through December 2nd of this year. So mark that down. I think that is all. I want to throw up a poll. So today we're really going to try to talk about what can we do better. What are some of the challenges in creating more diversity, equity, inclusion in our circles, in our companies? So if we can throw up the first poll question, and I've never done this before, so excuse me if I get a little wonky with it, but so this first one is, does your organization have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee? And we want to know yes, no, or we're talking about starting one, or I don't even know if we do. So please get in there and answer that poll.
All right, we're getting some results in. Looks like 68% of the respondents say yes. 16% said no. 11% said don't know, and then 5% are starting one. So,
okay.
I'll go ahead and do the poll for you.
All right, thank you. So yeah, a large, obviously the largest answer, or the most answers that came in is yes, we have one. We'll talk a little bit more about how that can get better, or if you don't have one, some things that can energize maybe that strategy. So I'm going to go to our first panelist, Shai McGowan, who's the sales director of the park systems at T2 Systems. And Shai and I have worked together through the T2 relationship off and on for years. And even when before T2, and I see in the background there, is that Ole Miss on the wall behind you, Shai?
Gary, now you know better.
So we got a Mississippi State person there. Shai brings a pretty cool background because she, as I mentioned earlier, as we've all observed, sort of the university and municipal world maybe has done a better job with diversity and equity and inclusion. So Shai has that background, and then she's been with the T2 group for quite a few years also. So my first question for you, Shai, is back last year, how did the Black Lives Matter events last year impact you and your company, and what happened as a result, Shai?
Okay. Me personally, of course, it was definitely very devastating, but not surprising from my perspective. This is something that was this is being brought to light, and I think that a lot of people acknowledged it and actually had some great comments and questions and wanted to start a conversation, right? And so in some ways, people felt some kind of way, and personally, they wanted to have that discussion, which I welcomed. And we talked about it. We had some questions. Even Gary and I had a conversation. But I think that overall, from a company perspective, that's where us as vendors had to, make sure that we were on board and in support of not only Black Lives Matter, but just in general when it comes to, supporting your employees and staff members in different ways. And so ways that we did that was just making sure that with the areas that we have for diversity and female inclusion, we wanted to make sure that we were articulating what our stance was as a company, and then also making sure we were putting actions together, right, to be able to move forward. So we weren't just speaking about it, put together actions. My only request with most of the people that I spoke with was that if you took action on something, make sure you finished it, right? And so most of the people, that I've spoke to, my family and friends, we did things together. I have a friend, and I won't even name said person, who included me on something that they were doing as a company. And that actually helped, kind of strengthen what that conversation looks like. And so it's one thing for us to talk about it, but it's also another thing for us to show action in some way. So don't build a list of 10 things and you never get to them. Start small and at least take some action on some things from a company perspective.
That is excellent. And I also want to chime in on that a little bit and compliment IPMI. When we first started talking about having these conversations, all of us that were involved in the beginning was we don't want to just do this once or just talk about it once. This needs to become a culture. And so we're going to keep working at it. And we've got all these different strategies. We've got a training path going, but these conversations like this are super important just to kind of hear personal experiences. I'm going to jump on to the next person, and this is Maggie DiPaolo from Laz Parking. She's the Director of Human Resources. So hi, Maggie, I'm glad you're with us. And my question for you is, how is your company helping your leaders and employees navigate unconscious bias?
Thanks, Gary. First of all, I'm humbled to be here. So thank you for allowing me to talk to all of you today. As Shai said, last year was certainly a very personal year for people. And Laz, wanted to help leaders and employees really navigate that. And so it really comes from a standpoint in the beginning of just starting the conversation, conversations like this, and really helping people define what unconscious bias is. I think, it doesn't come from just a diversity and inclusion standpoint, but it does, come from all things. We all come from different walks of life. And, we get in this, rhythm of automatic responses, and they are really unconscious. And so we started the conversation about what that means, and not just from a definition standpoint, but having a panel like this and having discussions about people's experiences with unconscious bias and how it's affected them personally. And that really set the table to start those conversations, having people feel a little more comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations, getting comfortable with uncertainty, what's going to come of that conversation, and really just helping define that. And I would encourage every company out there in the parking industry or out of the parking industry to just start the conversation, to get people comfortable, there, and being able to reach out. And as the rest of the group said, continuing that. It's not a one and done thing. It's really a movement. And it's creating that cultural shift within your organization to make sure that people have this ongoing dialogue about it. And, like Shai said, coming up with that list, but sticking to it and then continuing to add to that list. So we're really trying to help our leaders navigate those conversations with their teams and throughout one another, throughout their days and weeks within their time at their company. We spend more time with our companies than we do at home, really. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Maggie. It's great. Justin, can we put another poll up? We'll kind of keep this theme of work-related groups and DEI at groups. So in this one, do you feel your organization is doing enough to support diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives? Yes, no, or we're on the way, or I don't know. Do you feel your organization is doing enough to support diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives?
All right, I'll give it just another second here.
Sure.
All right, so looks like 69% we're on our way.
Thank you. I like that the honesty in the yeses, the no's, and the I don't knows. We're on our way is a good answer. And it's not like you can get this right, but it's good for me to hear that a lot of folks feel like the organizations are on their way, but it also means we still have a long way to go. So I'm going to move to our next panelist, Vincent Thomas with Reef Parking. He's a regional director in the New England area. And Vincent, I know you have a family member, I think, also that does a lot of teaching and training. I feel like that, if I remember right, you had talked about that with me, and I like some of the topics that you and I discussed, but can you share some insight on the evolution of diversity management and technology in business?
Yeah, certainly, Gary. And thank you for including me and joining this panel on this very important, critical topic. As we talk about the evolution of diversity, technology, and management, and how it's applied in today's organizations, I'm going to put my OD hat on for a second. I look at this as kind of on a continuum or on the spectrum, which helps an organization to glean where it stands regarding its diversity efforts. So if you go back to, let's start from, say, the early 60s, and let's move into today, 2021. In the beginning, I think there were a lot of organizations, based on information that I have, based on my research, who I would call were in the affirmative action stage, where pretty much their efforts were based on legal and moral motives. The issue was simply getting the numbers into the organization, and the strategy was basically recruitment, and that was it. However, the inclusion was limited mainly to Black and white, pretty much grounded in be seen and not heard. And there are also several assumptions, one of which was that minorities were getting something for nothing and that they were less qualified. So if you think of this particular era, let's say the early 60s to maybe mid 70s, that was the imperative for businesses. It was more or less putting a face on something so that individuals, be they vendors or folks that other companies work with, so they could see that at least you were making an effort. As you move from the mid 70s to, let's say, the mid 80s, I like to call this area the multiculturalism stage, where all of a sudden you see businesses where you're flowing from corporate image and to social responsibility. The issue is not only getting the numbers in, but it's keeping your numbers. So now we're talking about retention. The huge strategy there was implementing training programs, because that was important in keeping numbers in. You also wanted to broaden your base to include white women and some ethnic groups, which is, as you can see today, is reflective of a lot of organizations. This particular stage, the multicultural stage, was grounded in assimilation and kind of a melting pot vision where, we were all kind of one big happy family. Yes, we've got numbers in and we're all starting to get along. But the consequences in this stage were pretty much win-lose. It was pretty much a win for the organization, but not necessarily a win for the individual. If we go back to affirmative action, that was kind of like a lose-lose, and that didn't fly well. Well, if you fast forward to, let's say, the mid-'80s to today, you have what's called the complete diversity management enterprise, where it's based on competitive advantage. It makes good business sense. There are business cases that have been developed which directly impact the bottom line. The issue here, moving numbers up and breaking the glass ceiling. Systemic interventions were also applied and deployed. And one particular intervention has to do with keeping numbers in. And so at the multicultural stage, yes, you want to keep numbers in. The issue now is, how do you do that? What modalities do you use? What types of interventions are most successful with keeping people of color, women, white men as well in the organization, those who can see where the organization is going and how it certainly impacts the bottom line. Pretty much grounded in a tapestry approach, if you will, at this stage in diversity. And the consequences, I think, are win-win. Differences have business benefits, and they require new management skills to leverage the potential to have a positive impact on all employees. And this is pretty much where a lot of the I guess a lot of the organizations that are at your upper echelon of diversity management, your Pfizers, your Verizons, that sort of thing, that's where they are now. And so I think from my point of view, that's how the evolution of diversity management kind of came about to where we are today.
Awesome. Thank you, Vincent. Appreciate that. I'm going to move to Nathan Berry, now Vice President of Enterprise Sales with Passport. And you also may be curious how Nathan landed on our panel. I want to direct you all to an organization that Nathan and his wife started called brownicity.com. If you get a chance, go check out Brownicity, and that's brownicity.com. Really great work. And Nathan, because of the work he and his wife have done, has stumbled on a lot of good teachings and strategies and techniques. And so I think where I'm going with this question, Nathan, is we've heard from three talking about different strategies within the companies, but a lot of what we're also wanting to talk about is just one-on-one conversations, and conversations about race all too often become contentious and argumentative. What are the most common stumbling blocks to conversations about race, Nathan?
Well, thanks, Gary. And thanks to you and to IPMI for allowing me to be on this panel. It's definitely exciting. And just to that point, I think that it is important that, white people kind of live in the tension of doing this work, as well as promoting the voices of Black and people of color as it relates to this topic. But it's definitely important to be an active participant, whether that means listening, learning, or actually leading. But to your point, you're right. A lot of conversations do end up becoming somewhat contentious. And because of that, we become afraid to have the conversations after that. And there's really a few kind of major stumbling blocks that people tend to come across when it comes to their approach to having a conversation around race. And one of them is this whole approach of being colorblind. We kind of think like, oh, I'm colorblind, so it doesn't matter. And then what we actually end up doing is we teach our children to be colorblind, and then it takes away their ability and their empoweredness to have the conversation. So we should teach about color and teach about differences as opposed to being colorblind. The second one is we come from a selective or a skewed history, right? So when we're going through history during school, we really only learned about European conquest history as opposed to, all the other tapestry of history that is included in the U.S. history. You might remember in high school, you might have had 1 week that included both slavery and civil rights, and that was all built up. And yet we have the rest of the semester to talk about other history. So we're really coming from that place. Or what we do is we come from a place of a human interest story, right? So we have a friend, or I saw a story on TV that really touched my heart, and we put all of our eggs into that basket of a human interest story, as opposed to kind of the systematic injustices that happen throughout the country. And then the fourth one, which we are all, I think, very attuned to right now, is approaching this conversation from a political platform. Regardless of what party you're a part of within politics, their job is to get you to vote for them. And their job is to not teach you and, come at you in a responsible way. So, we're naturally divided in our country by political platforms. And once we get into, those kind of stumbling blocks, it makes it really difficult to have a productive conversation.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Nathan. I want to go to our fifth panelist now, Romy Valera, CEO of North America Pay by Phone. Romy, thanks so much for being with us. And you and I have had several conversations about this. As a matter of fact, I want to throw this out too. When we were first doing the fireside chat and I had four Black panelists joining me, I asked Romy, hey, are we doing the right thing during this era of making that conversation a little bit more about the challenges between Black and white? And Romy was very, because I was saying, well, what are the Asians going to think? What are the Latinos going to think? And Romy was very supportive of that topic, that effort. And we're moving this conversation a little bit more broader, but we don't want to miss sight on what all is going on in our culture, and that there is a real difficult challenge, just the whole Black and white thing. But sir, as a minority yourself, can you share with us about the pressures you felt when preparing for situations like interviews or boardroom settings or presentations? Tell us a little bit about your experiences.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you to the panelists and actually for IPMI to continue the conversation. I think that we've been all vocal that this is, what started last summer should continue on, and as you can see from the group that's attending, obviously this is an area of significant interest, and it should continue to be an area of significant interest. I have the long pleasure of serving this industry for the last 32 years or so, and when I started in the industry, this is an industry that it's beginning. Parking came from departments of public works and police departments, et cetera. So this is where the beginning of parking starts to evolve. And sure, yeah, I grew up in an industry that was extremely single focus on a white male. And I remember getting prepared for either interviews or presentations or in a boardroom. I always felt I had to be the most prepared individual in the room. And and that was always because of the fact that I was viewed as someone who was not part of that group, was not part of whether it was race or even from a historical perspective. So it's interesting how much I had to feel I had to be prepared in order for my knowledge to be to make it to the table, right? And that felt not only in as I grew up in the industry and then I was promoted and had different jobs in the industry, but even as you were interviewed, I mean, this is pretty sad when I say this, but there were times where our team will go present and the decision was made that Romy was not going to go into that boardroom, right? Because we just didn't, we were not going to, he was not going to identify with the panelist. And I remember one particular instance where we came in second place. And the reason we came in second place is because of the Mexican in the room. Of course, I'm not Mexican, but that's exactly how that progress for me has been over the last 30 years. And sure, it has gotten significantly better. I mean, you can see the room and the faces of the women and the people of color, Black, et cetera, that if this is completely different than when I started, 30 years ago, and it has progressed. Universities have obviously made a significant impact with the contribution of women and Black leaders in the industry. But yeah, it was a different case, and it was really, really tough growing up in that. And I think I also told you, I too have enjoyed white privilege. So as much as I've seen, the side of, where I've been biased or put in a corner or in a particular group, I've also enjoyed, the white privilege that, that comes with, the way I look, right? The green eyes, because I'm tall. Again, the expectation is that I don't fit that mold of, what the Latino should be. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Thanks a lot. There's a lot of personal things that you shared there, and we really appreciate you bringing that out. And hopefully that gets some people thinking, or if anyone has any questions, again, please use the chat box and get some conversations going there. We're going to go to our third and last poll question, and then I've got another round of questions for each of the panelists. But if we can get that poll question up, we'll have you guys take a look at this. Now we're thinking a little bit more personal this time. Have you participated in any opportunities to support DEI initiatives at your organization? Yes, no, or I haven't had the chance. Seeing a lot of yeses coming in. That's great. We kind of thought that might be the case. The folks that are probably on this are the most maybe interested or already initiated in this initiative. Justin, does that look like it's it? So I've got 68% yeses and 25% haven't had the chance. So hopefully we can spur on opportunities to have the chance if you want it in some of these companies that are represented, or some that aren't on our particular call at this point. So I'm going to come back up now to Shai. I wanted to ask you, this is, we heard a little personal challenges that Romy's dealt with. How about for you? Do you feel you've had to work harder as a woman or a minority to prove yourself? And how have you worked to create a path for other women or minorities to be included?
Sure. Yes. So you probably saw me nodding when Romy was talking. So hopefully that was, kind of giving a little bit of insight as well. I can feel where he's coming from there. But yes, I do feel like I've had to work harder as just a Black female in general. In our industry, Romy mentioned it, universities do a really good job of showing diversity and creating paths for them. Sometimes it's still a little bit challenging. But I believe that in the jobs that I've had, I've been able to speak out about how I would like to excel, right? How I would like to be able to, move to the next level and not just stay stagnant. And I think sometimes people don't believe that they can, speak up and say, hey, I want to be in X role at X date, how can you help me get there? Or making sure that you have the initiative to be able to set the path for others. So myself being able to, excel within both the university and the private sector, I've been able to create a path. And so what I'm doing with that is nurturing others that can come up, whether they're, females or minority of any type, making sure that I'm nurturing them so that they understand they have a path to come as well. I believe that when we look at the diversity in women throughout the industry, we need to know where to go get that talent, right? And so we need to know, as Vincent mentioned about recruitment, you need to know where to go get that talent. And so previous experience in working at T2 has been that having that direct conversation with HR, what are you doing to go look for, diverse people so that we can get that and make sure that representation matters? That's very important right now, especially in the time that we're in, but even before then, it has been important. So just making sure that we know where to go get that talent. We all know where most business professionals are. Are we really doing our part to go find that talent, right? Go to those recruiters or go to those areas, municipalities that have it, so that we can actually bring them to our area and to our forefront of parking and in the parking industry.
Thank you, Shai. Appreciate that.
Yep. No problem.
So, Maggie, let's move to you next. And what initiatives is your organization taking to move the needle to develop emerging minority leaders to navigate breaking barriers?
Sure. And Shai gave a great segue into what I want to talk about now. and appreciate you all feeling that HR plays an important role there. So as an organization, we are taking the first step, like I mentioned when I last spoke, about just starting the conversation. And we are, and I have the pleasure of working on this committee to really develop an emerging minority leaders mentoring program. And we are including all minorities, whether that's white women, that's veterans, that are other, race, gender, all those types of things. And we are trying to create this pilot group of people, of individuals who have a desire to talk about this topic, have a desire to help other leaders within the organization continue to grow and excel and break those barriers, that glass ceiling, if you will, to continue to grow their careers within our organization. Vincent and Shai talked about how it creates a more cohesive environment and creates bringing people from all different walks of life and their backgrounds to be able to add value to every conversation within an organization. So we're taking the approach that starting the conversation and having people be comfortable with talking to one another, and really in a sort of safe zone, right? With another leader who has maybe similar experiences to them, or another leader who has broken those barriers, to help these young emerging leaders really have an idea of what they should do next. It's really about, people want to be in this conversation, but it's like, what do we do from here? So we're trying to help those emerging leaders get past that and help others within the organization see that this is an important topic. And like I said before, it's continuing that conversation. So it's not one and done, one group of a mentoring program, but it's going to continue to evolve to include more people within the organization. And our hope is that the conversation continues, that the people that are included in this program as a pilot have continued conversations with others and help support this initiative and this continued conversation to get other people who may have been, either scared or uncomfortable to really, and didn't know how to start those conversations. So that's something we're doing. And hopefully those organizations that are represented on this call that have a committee are thinking about those things. Maybe you on the call can go back and suggest that, because we feel like that's really the most important place to start, to give people an avenue to start the conversation in somewhat of a safe zone, so we can continue to support these initiatives.
Thanks so much, Maggie. Really appreciate that. So we've talked a little bit about some of the strategies and why it's important and what maybe we can do. But Vincent, help us maybe take a look at what about if we don't? So please share with us some unaddressed issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that can affect businesses in general, and as well as the parking industry.
Certainly. With the industry experiences, there are certainly pros and cons. The negative side of this are the cost consequences of unaddressed issues, which can range from employee replacement costs, which can equal upwards of 95 to almost 100% of an ex-employee's salary. Those of you who are HR professionals, this right off the bat. If there's anybody in this meeting that works in the legal department, that as well. The litigation costs of sexual harassment and discrimination, they can average more than 1% of total operating systems. And we know how we all know how cumbersome that particular issue is. And the time spent in litigation and pre-work for litigation, that can never be recouped, as we all know. It takes it away from your regular job, your regular activities, your regular tasks, and now you have to put all of your energies into this particular environment where you have to address this. However, there are successful management strategies where this industry experiences have lent themselves to improvement of personnel performance. With diversity on work teams are more synergistic, which leads to increased productivity. In addition, companies that have started formal mentoring programs recognize that their employees are valued assets, and they want to help them become comfortable within the organization. I worked for a full service HR consulting firm way back when, and our company helped to put together and strategize a mentoring program for a major retailer, which worked out really, really well. And their particular workforce coming on was young, was female, and was people of color. And it worked very well. You talk about helping retention. It just goes to accentuate the care that companies put in wanting to make sure that they maintain and retain those employees. A couple of other benefits of diversity in terms of new approaches and expanding business opportunities provides retention of talented employees from a shrinking and slow growing labor force, especially now where you have a lot of jobs that are falling by the wayside and more technical jobs. More diverse work teams can provide new approaches to markets that were penetrated previously. And of course, there's the international impact of diversity. Because of the global competition, there's a need for more diverse work groups, especially as you need to understand the culture in which you operate. So these are just a few of the experiences in industry in general that avail themselves of diversity management.
That's great. Thanks, Vincent. Nathan, let's say you're in a hiring situation or you're in the position of interviewing or whatever. What would you tell companies that are wanting to diversify their team, but the most qualified individual most often ends up being a white male? What do we do about that when we're really trying to create more diversity?
That's such a great question because, and that's something that we are, processing through at Passport right now, and I'm sure multiple companies, that we kind of have this mentality of, yes, I want to hire diversity, but then it always comes down to, the most qualified person. And I would say a couple things. Number one, to Shai's point earlier, a lot of that comes from the channels in which talent come from, and so if we all have kind of our natural networking, the places that we go back to the places we come from, the people that we know, then our best candidates, or I should say our favorite candidates, are going to be those that are the most similar to us, as opposed to being intentional and exploring new channels of networking outside of parking, outside of what is our normal channels. The other thing is that we should look at our teams when we're hiring. We oftentimes hire for an individual seat in a vacuum, but we should look at the entire team and what is the team that I want to create that will give me the broadest perspective, the most diverse point of views, and help me reach the broadest audience. And if my team is 8 versions of the same person or the same demographic of a person, then I am going to be extremely limited in the audience that I'm able to effectively reach. The other piece of that, the other side of that coin, is that when a customer comes to us and they start looking around and they see it and that group of people doesn't match the customer, then that's going to put us in a difficult position. So instead of hiring for one particular seat, thinking about it in terms of the team and the makeup of our team. We've actually had customers come to our office in Charlotte, and they one of them used the phrase, "I just had to come look under the hood." And in other words, he was saying, I just needed to make sure that it's not just a bunch of white guys around here, but you actually have a diverse team. We had municipal employees who Passport was pursuing as a client come to us just to check that. And so we have to understand the value of that and the criticalness of that to our perspective, but also to our clients.
Awesome. That's so important. And I guess my takeaway is make sure I don't try to go look for other white guys that rocked a mullet in the 80s, because that's exactly what I did. All right, Romy, you've assembled an amazing team, and I watched that happen. I'm friends with several of them. Tell us about your approach in hiring a diverse team. You had an opportunity to really build a team, and what was your approach?
Nathan makes a good point. If you have to literally broaden your your network as it relates to, otherwise you're going to end up with people that just look like you. That's just a reality. Now, I was looking in the industry and trying to figure out and find out, one of the things I wanted to represent is I wanted to represent, the women leadership of this industry. And I wanted that to be, in the forefront of the company or the market that we were going to build here in North America. And, these are the people we, identified, and we agreed that these are the people that, look the most like our society, look the most like our clients. And these are the people that should be representing our company and our brand. But it is an effort. You have to make a significant effort and have a desire to really do something different and to really look. And these are, by the way, the best candidates. And there's people on this call that turn me down when I call them, and they know who they are. But this is an effort that has to be made, and you have to really be passionate about changing the course of of how we look. And I wanted to change the course of how we looked as a company. And I had the opportunity and the freedom and the guidance to basically go out and do that. So very proud that, again, putting an action behind what I strongly believed. I've had conversation with some of those people that the first question is, what is the opportunity for upward mobility? And some of those conversations have been in the past, not about the upward mobility based on opportunities for growth in a position, but is there an opportunity for upward mobility based on the fact that I am either a different race or I'm a different gender? And think about that for a minute. This is, these are our colleagues who are thinking, can I move up because of my worth, of my knowledge, of my skill set versus of who I am, as a gender or race? That's pretty deep from my perspective. And in putting that team together with a plan that there's a succession strategy that allows each and every one of them to one day occupy my seat. And that's really the long-term goal of that effort.
Thank you, Romy. That's amazing stuff. And so glad you did that. And I think definitely your customers are benefiting from the choices that you made as you put a team together. I think now it'd be a good time now. You've listened to us. Actually, this group, we're just getting started. We could talk all day. And I've got a few more questions to ask them if we have some time, but I want to stop and see if there's been some great activity over in the chat. Loving what I'm seeing over there. Justin, is there a question that has come in? And if not, let's just open it up right now and see if we can get some questions started from this group. Obviously, or hopefully we've created some comfort level by the different things that we've talked about, and maybe we can treat this as we're all family here, and let's ask some questions.
Yeah, the first question is from Kara. How can we start to encourage the wider company to care about diversity, equity, and inclusion instead of just folks already personally invested?
Hey, Maggie, could you try to take a stab at that?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to raise my hand. I mentioned earlier, we set on this initiative to create this mentoring program. And when our committee talked about it, we said, should we only include minorities as mentors? And we had quite a lively discussion about that. And then we said, you know what? We should include everyone. We're talking about diversity and inclusion here, right? And there's a lot of great perspective that people who are not in a minority group can add. And it also shows that, this isn't just about, minorities being in this one group of people and they're helping each other grow. It's not just about me helping other females, but it is about, having that dialogue open and allowing everyone to contribute to this movement. It truly is a movement. So when you think about programs that you're creating, Gary, you mentioned earlier, you're like, why am I here? Why am I moderating this? And it's like, we all can add a great different perspective. And then it shows those emerging minority leaders that people do care. They don't need to just seek out people who look like them to help them, guide them. So that's really how I would answer that question.
Awesome. Hopefully that was helpful. Justin, are there any other questions?
Second question is, how do you convince your team that broadening their network is important?
Shai, would you like to take that one?
Sure thing, Gary. Sorry, I was coming off of mute. I think from my perspective, I mean, I have tons of friends just in general, but from a networking perspective, this industry is known off of, relationships. It's, it's who you know. And even if it's just from a perspective of being introduced in some way, you're sometimes able to connect the dots with people and learning about people. Relationships has always been important to me. I think that's one, I say just because I'm from the South, we love to have great friendly conversations, but I think in our industry, the same rule applies. We like to have a lot of people that we're connected to in relationships and networking with other people outside of the norm, right? So if I can connect with, Nathan, who's not in my normal day to day, I can connect with him and he can be in my network. I could connect with Maggie from listening to her at the Winter Leadership Conference that we had in Pittsburgh. I connected with what she was able to provide from a wisdom perspective. So having that type of outside of your norm network allows you to grow personally. And then it also allows you to be able to showcase yourself to others throughout the industry that would be able to say, hey, this is someone I think, could be emerging. Hey, how can I help? How can I help nurture? How can I help grow? And then also from a networking perspective, you could either help others grow or others can help you grow. And I think that's really great for us to have just as a parking industry as a whole. But even if you get outside of that, that will help you be very versatile in many ways.
I love that. I had a couple other ideas, and I want to just pause on this question because I think networking is so important in so many ways, certainly related to this topic, but just your career and just quality of life, just having more friends and having more experiences, hearing from more voices. But just to kind of plug some opportunities within IPMI, we have, if you haven't gone through the CAPP program is a great way to sort of elevate your own career, but the networking that occurs during that program is pretty amazing. People will end up, in some cases, being friends for life just from going through the CAPP program together. And then we have a lot of committees that you can volunteer for. That usually comes up on every 2-year rhythm where we set up new committees. But if you're not on a committee and you want to get involved, you can reach out to us or IPMI and we'll find a place to plug you in to help build the network in that way. Does any of our other panelists have another take on how to broaden your network before we move on?
I might just add just be ready to step out into a new area. There's always nerves that are involved. There's always apprehensions that are involved. But grab a friend and go to a networking event that you don't necessarily traditionally fit into, and take an initial step. They always say the hardest step is the first step. So just do whatever you have to do to make that first step.
Great. Thanks. All right. Well, I'm going to move on to a couple more questions with the team. If you have a question, keep fire them away, and Justin will bump in. And I'm going to move back to asking Shai another question. This one will get just a little bit personal for you, but I think you're going to represent a voice. What types of things do you need to happen in your life so that you feel there is equality? That's
really no judgment for me. I think we all would like to live this very simple life where we don't have to worry about a lot of different things. From an equality perspective, everyone's on the same level, everyone's on the same page, and we all get an equal opportunity to be able to take advantage of opportunities that are out there, right, and be in a simple space. Not looking at, my name. For most of the people in the industry, they know me by Shai. Most of them, if they knew my real first name, they probably would not recognize it. Only a couple would know that. But no judgment for me. Makes me feel like, that would make me feel like everyone is equal. And I think that when it comes to our industry, I think that we do a good job in portraying that. I think as vendors and companies, we may not do as well of a job with that, and that's just at a high level. But I think that for me, it's making sure that there is no judgment overall.
Great. I follow you. Maggie, we've talked a little bit about this. Is there a different take you could add to what can organizations do to help leadership understand the impact DEI initiatives can have on their workforce?
Sure. I think we've talked about this throughout the panel today, throughout this discussion, and I think it's just a quick recap of making sure the conversation continues and it's not a one and done. And if you start out an initiative of a mentoring program, you start an initiative of a once a month or once every other month panel, that you continue those discussions and continue to allow a diverse group of employees participate in those opportunities. It truly is an opportunity to be part of something like that. And I do think while we may not think someone might be interested, we just need to ask the question. We may not see them. They might be the quiet person that's sitting in the room on a panel, and they haven't asked a question, and they may just need a little bit of a bump to say, here's something you can do. So I think as an organization, you continue to have those conversations and help people really get the conversation started.
Excellent. Vincent, we've talked a little bit about networking and recruiting. Help us a little bit with some ideas on retention and then development strategies within the group that you may already have. Obviously, we don't want to lose any work that we've already achieved in this topic. One
of the strategies that I employed, and this was just for me in my own career, was calibrating the relationship between myself and my manager, and then myself and my subordinates. And one of the processes that I used, I employed something called a quality of work-life survey. And that quality of work-life survey mentioned or looked at pretty much 8 factors that would affect, my development or my subordinates' development. Teamwork, what does that look like? And what's our relationship there? Our supervisory relationship, my career development, organization resources, communication, contribution recognition, that sort of thing. And what I would do, and I politely asked my boss if he wouldn't mind to, answer a few questions. I would answer these questions for myself, and then you take a look at them and you say, okay, where are we aligned and where are we not aligned? I mean, because that more than, getting a performance assessment from my manager means more than anything. The performance assessment is check this box, check this box, check this box. No, I don't want that. I want my manager to tell me, look, Vince, as far as teamwork, this is where I think you are. And I can say, well, I agree or disagree. This is where I think I am. But then you look at that and you say, okay, well, what do we do to get aligned here? Or are we aligned at all? Sometimes there's no alignment. And in the end, the answer is either exit the department, exit the organization, or you part ways, or you look for those things where you do have alignment and you say, okay, this is what we need to work on. Let's regroup again in, 60 days or 90 days or whatever it is. These are the strategies that we're going to employ. These are the tactics, and we'll see if we can move the needle in a positive direction.
Thanks, Vincent. That's very helpful. Is there any other questions that have come in, Justin?
No other questions, Gary.
Okay. Please, if you all are sitting on one, there's not anything that anyone's going to judge you on. So if you want to ask something, fire away. I've got another good question I want to ask Nathan. What is one thing you would tell white people who are open and want to learn, but afraid they are going to do or say the wrong thing?
I would say to be less concerned about whether or not I'm racist or not, and more concerned about what are the things that have informed my cultural context around the way that I think, the way that I talk, my worldview. My wife and I have been married for 20 years. My wife is Black. We have 3 children together. She's actually sitting right over here. We have 3 children together. And, you would think that I would kind of be over it, at this point. But when you're completely honest, I still have a tendency to fall into my white privilege. I still have this tendency to take advantage of my white privilege, or my male privilege, or any of the privileges that I hold. And so at some point you have to like set that down, because that doesn't ever really go away. You can have to continue to evolve and to continue to grow and continue to fight against the tendencies that we have to fall into that. So let's be less concerned about whether or not we're racist or not, and let's be more concerned about learning and growing and developing relationships.
Yeah, I love that. Just a personal experience with that is, as I kind of went on my own journey and started talking to a lot of friends and ex-employees and people above me, people at my level, I kept learning a lot of things, but it takes that sort of one-on-one conversation and just get comfortable with, asking the question. I have learned a lot when I bring up the topic of driving while black. I had no clue, and maybe it's just because I'm this white guy in middle America in Kentucky. I had no clue that was such a big thing, that black families sitting around the table are telling their teenagers, if a police officer pulls you over, don't move your hands. I never had to have that conversation with my dad. But I didn't even know those conversations. And I've had black roommate in college. I've had lots of great friends, just never had those types of conversations. So Nathan, I think that's, I think a lot of times we are worried about how that question's going to come across. But I think when your heart's right and you're just trying to learn, most of the time that carries on. I have loved seeing a lot of the conversation going on in the chat, and we're getting really close here. I don't know, Justin, if there anything else popped up. I love playing in the chat and moderating this. I haven't been able to get over there and have fun with you guys, but I saw a lot of great conversations going on. Anything else, Justin? Then I'm going to let, if any of the panelists have a final thought.
We do. We have time for one last question here. The question's from Pinky. How do we show municipalities we are making progress in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
And let me take that real quick, because I have an experience recently where we did a parks RFP, and this could get sensitive. I won't mention company names or anything, but most of the companies, their entire representation was white males, and even in the proposal, there were a few that might have had a female. Maybe had a person of color, but one in particular of the parks groups basically was 50% minority in their proposal and presentation. And it really meant a lot to me. And I'm white. I can't imagine, had a female or someone of color also been sitting on the selection committee, and there was, how that made them feel when they saw people that looked like them in the presentation or in the proposal. So that's just a personal experience recently with me. Anybody else that's had, Romy, you spoke to it and you've been in and around in municipalities. What would you say to that question real quick?
I think these are the kind of efforts that, municipalities should be aware that's happening, that there's a conversation, within, the greater group of the ecosystem that we all work and we live in, that is taking on these conversations, these very uncomfortable conversations. And, this is the group here that, if you're taking the time to do this, is because you have an invested interest in really making a change, and be outspoken about it, and demand from where we work from, that, these things are done, and they're portrayed to, to our colleagues and to members of this industry. And I think that's going to go a long way in being noticeable.
Oh, sorry. Anybody have a final thought? We've got like 1 minute. Any of the panelists not get something out you hope to share real quick?
I would like to share something, Gary. There's a book called White Fragility that I think is super powerful. And to Romy's point about what would you tell white people, I think it's a great place to start. So I'll try to find the link on Amazon and stick it in the chat quick.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much. This has been great, great conversations going on. Hopefully that you've gotten a good vibe and some good takeaways, and maybe you can go back and influence your company, and we can all together influence our industry and make this place that we all work and serve and work with each other a lot more diverse. Justin, you want to wrap it up for us?
Be happy to. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. We will be making this recording available within a few days. If you have any questions or comments that you want to continue, the forum is a great place to do so. So again, thank you very much for attending, and we will now disconnect.